discuss hypoglossal nerve, which is the 12th cranial nerve. So hypoglossal nerve nucleus is located in the medulla oblongata. So the hypoglossal nucleus, the axons from this nucleus now come out of the medulla oblongata at the junction between the pyramid and the olive. You can remember that other cranial nerves, like cranial nerve number 9, the glossopharyngeal nerve, the one that I discussed before, the vagus nerve, as well as the accessory nerve, they all emerge between the inferior cerebellar peduncle and the olive. So all the three nerves, that means the 9s, the 10s, and the 11s, they get out of the medulla oblongata between the inferior cerebellar peduncle and the olive. It is only this hypoglossal nerve that comes out of the medulla oblongata between the olive and the pyramid. So hypoglossal nerve comes out of the cranial cavity through a canal known as hypoglossal canal. The hypoglossal canal is just passageway for the hypoglossal nerve by the side of the foramen magnum. Foramen magnum, is a large, hole through which the spinal cord and the medulla oblongata, some portion of it, pass out of it. So the hypoglossal nerve canal is by the side of this foramen magnum. So they are situated on either side, left and the right, like that. So the canals, it is through which the hypoglossal nerve passes. So as the hypoglossal nerve comes out of the hypoglossal canal, the nerve now comes and lie anterior to the divisions of the carotid artery. That means the nerve lies anterior to the internal carotid artery as well as anterior to the external carotid artery. Similarly, it lies also in relation to the anterior surface of the lingual artery, which is a branch of the external carotid artery. So by the time this nerve lies in relation to these structures, the nerve goes to the tongue to supply the muscles of the tongue. As the nerve approaches one large muscle like that is lying vertically upward like that, from the hyoid bone into the tongue, that muscle hypoglossus. So as the nerve now approaches the posterior surface of the hypoglossus muscle, which is this one, the nerve now divides into branches. One branch to one muscle that originates from the styloid process down to the tongue. And that is what we call styloglossus muscles. So from the styloid process down to the tongue, that is styloglossus muscle. So that nerve, the hypoglossal nerve, gives a branch of this muscle. It also gives a branch of this muscle that it lies on. That is the hyoglossus. How many branches now? 2 branches. One to the styloglossus, the other one to the hyoglossus. The nerve continues also to supply a branch to another muscle that originates from the inner surface of the mandible down to the tongue. And that is what is known as genioglossus. So from the inner surface of the mandible, that muscle originates and then blends into the tongue muscle, and that is what we call genioglossus. So the nerve now gives how many branches? 3. Styloglossus, hyoglossus, and genioglossus. The final branch is one that goes into the internal aspect of the tongue, and that is this branch supplies the intrinsic muscles of the tongue. That means the tongue has 2 types of muscles, what we call intrinsic muscles of the tongue and extrinsic muscles of the tongue. The extrinsic muscles are this: styloglossus, hyoglossus, genioglossus. Are you clear? So the intrinsic muscles of the tongue, they are the muscles that control the shape of the tongue. So they are of 3 different categories. There are transverse fibers. You see that I have drawn them transversely like that. So these are the transverse fibers of the intrinsic muscles. And then we have vertical fibers. I put them in blue. So we have vertical fibers of the intrinsic muscle of the tongue, and then we have longitudinal fibers that are lying longitudinally like that across these fibers. So the intrinsic muscle of the tongue are three: transverse, vertical, and longitudinal. So this branch also supplies all these three categories of the intrinsic muscles of the tongue. So now we have how many branches? 4 branches. Branch to the saloglossus, branch to the hyoglossus, branch to the genioglossus, and the branch to all the intrinsic muscles of the tongue. That is, for these muscles. So similarly, there is also a contribution to the formation of the hypoglossal nerve. This contribution comes from the spinal nerve number 1, that is spinal nerve C1, cervical spinal nerve 1. So this contribution comes and joins the hypoglossal nerve. You get it? So some of the fibers, they follow the hypoglossal nerve, lie in relation to all these structures that I made mention before. So this branch from the C1 lies also anterior to this internal carotid artery and external carotid artery, anterior to the lumbar artery, and then it goes towards the hyoglossus muscle. Lies, superficial to the muscles, and then it now gives a descending branch to the thyroid muscle. So there is a thyroid cartilage that is lying in the neck here, the beginning of the larynx and what have you. So from the larynx or from the thyroid cartilage down to the hyoid bone, So this muscle now, that's what we call thyroid muscle. So it gives this contribution from the spinal C1 to the hypoglossal nerve, gives a descending branch to the thyroid muscle, and also it gives a branch to another muscle, what we call geniohyoid muscle. That muscle originates from the lower aspect of the inner side of the mandible to also attach on the hyoid bone. And so that is why it is called geniohyoid muscle. So that nerve also receives contribution from the hypoglossal nerve through its contribution from spinal nerve number 1. You get it? So now, apart from joining the hypoglossal nerve from below, this contribution from C1 also follows the hypoglossal nerve from above, and then it enters through the hypoglossal canal, through which this hypoglossal nerve comes out. So it gets out of the hypoglossal canal to go and supply the dura mater in the posterior cranial fossa. So this is the meningeal branch supplying the dura mater in the posterior cranial fossa through the hypoglossal nerve. So the dural branch or meningeal branch from the hypoglossal nerve is through the spinal nerve 1. Are you clear? So that is all for this nerve. So if somebody has a cut on this nerve, all these muscles are going to be paralyzed. Are you clear? And so the tongue is going to deviate to the, is it opposite side or the movement of the tongue? When you ask somebody to bring the tongue out like this, so the movement is toward the center. You get it? That is the way the muscle, this one is pushing toward the center, this one is also pushing toward the center. So when this is paralyzed, this one will push. So there's an opposite action of this muscle from this side. So the tongue muscle deviates to the where? Side of the region or side of? Understand the logic clearly. This one is pushing toward the center. This one is pushing toward the center so that they strike a balance in the midline. So in case this right side muscles paralyzed, this one will push. So the tongue will deviate towards the side of the region. Exactly. That is what it is. But let me tell you something, which it can happen again. There is also corticobulbar fibers coming from the cortical areas and also the synapse with this nucleus of hypoglossal nerve. These cortical fibers from the cortex, from the right side, if this is the cortex of the right side here, and this is the cortex, this is right, and this is left. So if this corticobulbar fibers now will go to the hypoglossal nerve, come from above like this. So they now crisscross to the opposite side. So also this one also from the right side crisscross to this side within the medulla oblongata. So in case there is a problem on the left hypoglossal nerve motor neuron, upper motor neuron, this is upper motor neuron. In case there is a lesion here, what happens? This one supplies the opposite side. So what happened? What will happen? Is it to the opposite side or to the same side of the lesion? Is it opposite side or the same side? Opposite side, exactly. So that is the way to differentiate between the lower motor neuron and upper motor neuron lesion of the hypoglossal nerve. That is all for the hypoglossal nerve. I will have a break before I now discuss the next nerve.